My name is Tory Barrett, and I was 30 years old when I graduated from basic training. For 10 weeks, I woke up every morning at 4:30. I ran miles in the dark, learned to disassemble a rifle in under a minute, and walked through a gas chamber with my eyes burning and my lungs screaming. I earned every single second of that graduation. On the day it finally came, 300 of us stood in formation at Fort Moore with pressed uniforms and boots polished to a mirror shine. The bleachers behind us were packed with families. I could hear them before I even turned around. Mothers crying, fathers whistling, little kids holding up glittery handmade signs. I allowed myself one glance over my shoulder during the ceremony. Section F, third row, seats 7, 8, and 9. I had given my father, my mother, and my sister those exact seat numbers 6 weeks earlier. All 3 chairs were empty. When it was over, the soldiers around me disappeared into walls of arms and tears. I stood in my spot and watched. A woman I had never met walked up and put her hand on my shoulder and said she was proud of me. I thanked her. But those 3 empty chairs were only the beginning of what I needed to understand about my family. The rest of the story starts with a text message my father sent 3 weeks later, and with the afternoon, I finally changed the locks on my own front door. Let me tell you about the Barrett family so you can understand what I was working with. My father, Ray Barrett, was a plumber in Collinsville who earned around $62,000 a year. He had paid off his house completely and drove a Ford truck. He washed every single Sunday without fail. He was the kind of man who remembered every dollar he had ever spent on his children. Not written down anywhere, just stored permanently in his head, and he made sure you never forgot what you owed him for it. My mother, Diane, stayed home and quietly surrendered every decision to Ray. What they ate, where they went, which daughter deserved more. She had her own opinions, but she kept them put away like the good china that never actually gets used. Then there was Megan, my older sister, 3 years ahead of me and first in line for everything our parents had to offer. She wore the new dress to every school dance, while I altered her old ones to fit me. She received $2,000 from our parents toward her first car. I was told to take the bus and get a job at the ice cream shop. When she moved into her first apartment, my parents covered her deposit. When I moved into mine, my father said I was smart and would figure it out. He was right that I would figure it out. He was wrong to think that made it fair. I joined the Army at 28. People always ask why I waited so long, and the honest answer is that I spent my entire 20s doing things my family should help me with at 18. I paid for my own college degree in logistics and supply chain management by working 3 jobs at once. Warehouse shift in the morning, tutoring students in the afternoon, weekend work for a food distribution company. I graduated with student loans and without a single dollar from my parents. My father's reasoning was straightforward and unchanging. Megan needed help because she struggled, and I didn't need help because I was managing fine. The fact that I was only managing fine because I was working myself into ground was not a detail he ever chose to examine. After college, I built a stable career, but I wanted something with more purpose. My husband, Jake, had served 4 years in the Army and loved it, so at 28 I enlisted. My father shrugged and said it was my choice. My mother told me to be careful. Megan asked if I would miss her birthday party. Before I shipped out for training, I gave my father a spare key to the house Jake and I owned, a house we had bought 2 years earlier using a VA loan, and 6 years of my savings. I handed him the key at our kitchen table and told him it was only for emergencies, in case they needed to check on things while I was gone. He took it without saying thank you and clipped it onto his key ring like it already belonged to him. I should have understood what that gesture meant. I had also set up an automatic payment of $400 a month going directly into my father's bank account. He had never asked for it, but he complained constantly about money and about how much Megan needed, and somewhere in that guilt I had decided to help. I had paid off Megan's credit card twice before I left. She said she would pay me back. She never mentioned it again. Basic training is designed to show you exactly who you are when you have nothing to fall back on. Every Sunday, we were given 10 minutes to call home. I called my mother every week without missing one. The first week I told her about our drill sergeants and the red clay dirt that stained everything. She listened for a moment and then started talking about Megan's upcoming wedding. By the third week, my father answered, said my mother was busy with Megan, and hung up before a minute had passed. After that, no one picked up at all. I stopped calling. The only mail I received during those weeks was from Jake. Letters with a photograph of our dog Biscuit tucked inside, and words telling me he was proud of me. I kept that photograph folded in my front pocket for 5 weeks. My drill sergeant, Sergeant Reeves, was a sharp and observant woman. She asked me one afternoon whether anyone was coming to Family Day. I told her yes. I knew perfectly well that nobody was coming. When Family Day arrived, the base was full of noise and balloons and the smell of food that families had brought in coolers. I watched from a window. Sergeant Reeves found me there and walked me over to another soldier's family without making a production of it. The soldier's mother didn't ask any questions. She just pulled me into a hug and handed me a plate of fried chicken. I sat and ate with strangers while, as I found out later, my own mother was at a bridal shop with Megan trying on wedding hats. She posted a smiling photograph of herself in one that same afternoon. Graduation day felt like it happened very fast. I walked across the stage and looked at the section where I had reserved 3 seats. They were empty. My mother sent a text message saying they were caught up helping Megan handle some wedding expenses. She asked if I understood. I understood more than she realized. Jake was waiting for me at the airport with a handwritten sign and a smile that told me he already knew they hadn't come and was sorry for it. When I got home, our dog ran circles around me. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 10 weeks and tried to let myself feel good about what I had accomplished. The next day, I went to see my parents. My mother seemed surprised I was already back. My father didn't say congratulations. He asked if I had lost weight, then turned back to the television. Megan arrived and spent 30 minutes talking about her wedding without asking me a single question about where I had been or what I had been through. Something shifted in me during that visit. Not dramatically. It wasn't a moment of rage or tears. It was quieter than that. It was a feeling of a door closing on something I had been trying to keep open for a very long time. I noticed on the drive home that the $400 payment had gone through again. No acknowledgement. No thank you. Just gone from my account as usual. Then Jake told me he had come home one afternoon to find things move around in our garage. Shelves had been rearranged. There were new holes drilled into our walls. My father had let himself in with the key I gave him for emergencies and had moved a significant portion of his belongings into our space without a word of notice or request of any kind. When I called him, he told me to calm down. He said he needed the room. I did not fight him about it that day. Instead, I took photographs of everything he had stored there. Every box, every item, the holes in the walls, the rearranged shelving. Then I canceled the automatic monthly payment. It took 11 days for anyone in my family to notice. My mother called first and said they were counting on that money. I told her my father had a steady income and a paid-off house and did not need mine. She responded by listing everything my parents had ever done for me. When I asked her to name one thing they had done for me that they hadn't done more generously for Megan, the call went quiet. Then my father called, furious, and told me family was supposed to help each other. I reminded him that he had not shown up for my graduation. He hung up. Jake stood behind me on every decision I made during this period, and that mattered more than I have words for. But the morning that settled everything was a Saturday when my father sent a text message demanding $8,000 toward Megan's wedding. There was no greeting, no context, no pleas, just the amount and the expectation. Around the same time, I saw photographs from a bridal appointment where Megan had tried on a dress that cost over $4,000. I looked at the text for a long moment. Then I opened a payment app, sent my father exactly $8, wrote 2 words, best wishes, and turned my phone off. The response from my family was immediate and prolonged. Message after message calling me selfish, cruel, embarrassing, ungrateful. My uncle weighed in to suggest that my father should simply use his key to come to the house and talk sense into me in person. That was the moment I understood that the key could not stay in existence. Jake drove to the hardware store and came back with new locks for every door. While he worked, I searched the garage and found a copy of our house key my father had hidden separately, presumably as a backup to his backup. I threw it away. While I was going through the garage, I pulled up our family group chat and started reading back through months of old messages. Near the top, I found one from my father referring to me as the family's backup plan. He had written that Megan always needed help, and I was always fine. So help went to Megan. He had said it plainly and without apology in a message he apparently assumed I would never see, or perhaps didn't care if I did. It hurt to read it. I sat with that hurt for a while. Then I put my phone down and got back to work, because I had things to do. I gave my father 7 days to collect his belongings from our garage and told him clearly what would happen if he didn't. On the last day, he showed up. He tried his old key on the new lock before knocking, and when it didn't turn, he started shouting in our driveway. When we let him in to collect his things, he told me I was acting like a criminal. He told me my Army graduation didn't count as a real graduation. Jake stepped forward and said what he needed to say quietly and without backing down. I told my father that Jake was my real family, because real family shows up. My father left without responding. Megan called the following day, made one more attempt at the $8,000, and when I declined, she told me I was no longer invited to the wedding. I said that was fine. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. Jake and I cooked together and took Biscuit for a long walk. I found out afterward that my father had told everyone at the reception that I couldn't attend because I had been deployed. He could not bring himself to admit to his own relatives that we were not speaking. So he invented a version of events that let him keep his pride. When I heard that, I sent a message to the full family group explaining what had actually happened. The empty graduation seats, the garage, the $8,000 demand, the canceled payments, all of it. My father responded by calling the police and reporting that I had stolen his property. When the officers arrived, I was ready. I walked them through the garage with my photographs, my written notes, the dated timeline of when he had moved things in without permission, and the notice I had given him to collect them. The police looked at everything, spoke to my father, and told him that changing the locks on my own home was not a crime, and that I had followed a reasonable process for returning his belongings. He left in his clean Ford truck, furious, and I watched him go from my front porch. I went back inside and threw away the last piece of the old key. There are things I understand now that I didn't have words for while I was growing up in that house. I understood that Megan got more than I did, but I told myself it was because she needed more. I understood that I was always working harder than seemed necessary, but I told myself that was just who I was. I didn't understand until I read my father's own words in that group chat, that I had been assigned a role before I was old enough to choose one. The role of the one who doesn't need anything. The backup plan. The one who is fine. The only reason I was fine was because I refused to stop. I worked 3 jobs and paid my own tuition, and bought my own house, and wired my father $400 a month out of guilt, and showed up for every family occasion while they skipped mine. I was fine because I made myself fine, and they took credit for it by simply staying out of the way. I am not angry about this anymore in the way I was. What I feel now is something closer to clarity. I know who showed up for me when it counted. I know who was waiting at the airport with a handwritten sign. I know whose family sat me down at their table on Family Day and gave me fried chicken and didn't ask any questions. I know which photograph I kept folded in my pocket for 5 weeks. Family is not only the people you share blood with, it is the people who actually show up. And if someone has made it clear over years and years of small choices that showing up for you is not something they intend to do, then you are allowed to stop rearranging your life around their needs. You are allowed to change the locks. You are allowed to send $8 and mean it. You are allowed to sit at home on a day you were not invited to and feel nothing but relief. That is where I am now. A new chapter, quieter and more honest than anything that came before it. And it feels exactly like what I spent 30 years working toward without knowing it, a life that is genuinely mine.